So, have you watched Hilda yet? If not, then what are you doing watching this video? Go steal someone's Netflix password and watch that shit, cause it just might be the best new animated series to have come out this past half year, and I don't seem to be the only one sharing that sentiment. With its lush color palette, imaginative story, fun characters, and just beautiful atmosphere altogether, I haven't felt this truly lulled in by a show in quite some time. And I feel like the voice acting on that show was also on point. I mean, they all did such a great job at making these characters feel alive and organic, even what normally would be one of my least favorite character archetypes, Alpha. He's so energetic and yet never over the top. I think whoever voiced him might be one of my favorite casting choices in the show so far. I sure hope I get to hear this guy in other great shows.
Hey dudes, what's the haps? I thought it was bad for your rep to be seen with us. I was a major chump trumpet to you peeps.
Huh. Why do I feel the sudden urge to call the Ghostbusters? Dude, that's my Ghost! A relatively recent show from the British Disney XD channel. In fact, the most recent show that I've talked about in this series so far, and one that also got recommended to me a whole bunch. Which is somewhat surprising, considering it only ran for exactly 1 year before ultimately being canned after its first season. With 52 episodes total, and it also never aired outside of Great Britain, the Turkish Disney XD, and a few other select countries. With a title like that, it really makes you wonder what could have led the network to such a decision.
Dude, where's my ghost? Where's your ghost, dude?
But what is this show about? Well, if you couldn't tell from the title, the show's about ghosts. More specifically this ghost, named Billy Joe Cobra, an ex-musician slash prodigy that unfortunately died at the age of, I don't know, like 19 or something. In this universe, people seem to turn into ghosts after they die, though mortals can't see them unless they were an item that used to belong to that ghost. At least I think that's how it works. It's never explicitly stated either how Billy Joe died or if he's the only ghost that can be seen through wearing his old merchandise or something. The rules are never explicitly stated, but we're just gonna roll with it, I guess. We do know that his distant cousin slash best friend Spencer Wright is able to see Billy, in addition to a few of his friends, along with whom Spencer likes to film short movies, vlogs if you will. So prepare yourself for a whole bunch of dated internet references in this one. This is the year 2013 we're talking about. Shows were using any excuse they could find to have a YouTube-obsessed teen in their show, but it's rare to have the whole show centered around him, except for iCarly. But even though the slide transitions and Spencer holding a camera in the show's intro may lead you to believe that, the show isn't always super focused on their film hobby. Oftentimes it's just Spencer having to bust out of detention or dealing with some sort of situation Billy has gotten them into again, which does tend to be his fault. But hey, the dude's dead. Spencer can't tell him what to do. He's been through all that crap in his lifetime. Why bother with it again? Unlike in most other shows, Billy Joe doesn't exactly have any unfinished business to take care of in our world or something like that. He was at the height of his popularity when he died and rather likes to reinforce that point whenever he gets the chance to. But since the people around him are both not able to see him and often aren't even aware of his past success, he needs to get Spencer to take care of it. It's a weird relationship between the two, and more often than not, Spencer ends up being the butt of the joke, or if not that, doesn't exactly get portrayed in the most heroic fashion. The episodes tend to not really feel satisfying after you're done watching, which might also be because their plot are really generic. I may have done a little joke with its theme song as an opening to this video, but the connections to Nickelodeon's Danny Phantom are scarce, if there at all. Whereas Danny has all sorts of different abilities when he turns into his ghost counterpart, like ghost breath, glowy gooey stuff, and flight, Billy Joe is only one of those. Well, maybe ghost breath too, but that might just be from eating too much fast food. But they really didn't make full use of the potential this premise had, in my opinion. Not to mention that Billy Joe is the most annoying character in the show by far. Remember that clip I played earlier? Imagine the whole show being exactly that. Oh, I'm sorry. Must have been a typo in my script. I meant the whole bro being like that.
A bro who's really good at things is a professional?
No.
What do you use when you're quoting your bro? Brotation marks.
Stop.
Go Spencer, you're a rock star. Get your game on.
Oh. I guess they were ahead of the meme curve. This normally wouldn't be that big a deal. I mean, this is just an episodic show after all. The dialogue is only secondary to the comedy, which mostly gets portrayed through the visuals. But when half the show only consists of cheap one-liners, it feels less like a group of friends just making their way through school, and more like an episode of The Big Bang Theory, which I might have been actually willing to watch had they killed off Sheldon and turned him into a ghost. The series was apparently designed by this guy, whose name I'm not even gonna bother trying to pronounce, who also created X, another too edgy for me episodic cartoon that primarily aired on Jetix, but unlike that show, this was animated in Flash, which they absolutely didn't bother hiding in the animation. The snappiness in some of this does distract a little bit, nothing looks all that natural and pretty lazy. Not ugly per se, though there were some questionable decisions made in the design department. It's all just very bland, none of the characters really stick out. Take this guy. He's supposed to be the super duper evil bad guy in the show, but could you honestly tell me that just based on this design? Or how about Billy Joe himself? I watched all the episodes of the show, I've seen this guy interact with his surroundings and talk about the time he was alive, but still I honestly couldn't tell you how old he is supposed to be, and don't get me started on the students in Spencer's grade. No, I'm serious. Don't get me started. I don't have a script for this part. It's also making it somewhat hard to sympathize with Billy Joe when he's the most egotistical character in the entire show. Sure, he can do whatever he wants, but when there's no real chemistry between our two main characters, then I also don't want to see either of them succeed. Their friends are also barely noteworthy. One of them is just there to be the unattractive nerd cliché, and the other one is just there. Spencer's parents are even worse, to be honest. Think the dad from Malcolm in the Middle, and even dumber, divided amongst two just complete incompetent individuals. If there was one character in the show I'd felt somewhat attached to, I would mention him here, but honestly all of them were so by the numbers that they ultimately could have been replaced by any other character archetype in a similar setting and it wouldn't have affected the core plot in the slightest. And thanks to the lack of tension from stupid dialogues and mediocre characters, I never felt compelled to continue watching. Now obviously, I can only speak from experience as a 19-year-old media consumer who doesn't know the inner workings of how the show was created, but it still genuinely feels like they looked at a bunch of other shows that either were popular at the time or used to be and scrapped a bunch of ideas into this show. You have the character designs from Wayside, the ghost concept and flight animation from Danny Phantom, the friends are a conglomerate from all over the place. Well, except for Rajiv, I guess, who's very clearly Sheen from Jimmy Neutron. You also have the frickin' poses from the Gorillas, and their villainous principal is just Crocker from the Fairly OddParents with a wig. Let's talk about this guy for a second though, because although he is technically the guy that wants to get rid of Billy Joe, he barely gets any screen time at all. Even less than Spencer's supposed love interest, who also seems to have just disappeared after the first half of the season. Spencer's principal, Ponzi, is one of the weirdest characters in the show. His entire motivation in life seems to be following Spencer around or occasionally trying to hook up with whatever female being he can find. Or seemingly female, as when he fell for the ghost hunting guy, or this teacher that's easily 20 years older than this 50-year-old man. Although age differences don't seem to exist in this universe in general, if we look at that time when a school jock hooked up with Spencer's sister, which, I don't know, that just looks wrong. But back to Ponzi. Like I said, he doesn't have an actual end goal from what I can tell. He isn't actually aware of Billy Joe, but rather suspects that Spencer is hiding something from him based on how often Ponzi catches him talking to himself. Apparently, that is reason enough for him to make Spencer's entire school life absolutely miserable and the buzzkill at every possible corner. Try to take a guess if that gets old at any point in the show. They tried to give him some sort of motif for all this later on when they made an episode about how he used to be into ribbon dance, until Billy Joe made him lose their version of America's Got Talent, titled This Country is Good at Things. Which admittedly did make me laugh. But it still felt so shoehorned in, and he didn't actually end up learning anything and just went back to the status quo thanks to Billy Joe. If anything, this episode left me conflicted about whether I wanted to sympathize with a piece of crap main character, or his piece of crap best friend's piece of crap principal. In this world, you have to learn to evenly distribute your rage. But hey, if you enjoyed the show while it was on, I shouldn't be here to stop you. All in all, I feel like this one could have really benefited from doubling down on Billy Joe having some sort of direction for what he wants to do with himself now that he doesn't have any responsibilities anymore, or put more focus on Spencer wanting to direct his films, instead of having the show be all over the place with its characters that therefore ultimately didn't leave any lasting impact. Also, the fact that Billy isn't able to interact with any of the other characters, as boring as they may be, really only restricts the show, as Spencer has to always step in and tell whatever person he wants to talk to what Billy wanted to say, which only artificially lengthens the episode. Legend Quest on Netflix would go on to do this way better a few years later. Here, for example, there's two ghosts that can interact with the main character and each other in some way, and the rules also seem to be much more clearly laid out. Because, you guessed it, Billy Joe is still able to pick up objects and nobody seems to care. You have a ghost as a main character, guys. Why don't you do something more with this? If you want to do a buddy duo type comedy that's that's fine, but don't hide it under the mantle of a budding filmmaker who wants to make horror films along with his ghost sidekick, because this really isn't. The ghost aspect could have been completely scrapped for some of these plot lines, and the filmmaking aspect is barely relevant for most of them. If you were able to enjoy this, then I'm glad, but for those of you who never get to see it in the first place, well, you didn't miss much. My name is Cosmodore, and I'm still waiting on that Danny Phantom reboot.
He's a phantom. Zombies coming up from the ground. Ghouls and monsters